Doug Ford's support has appeared to absolutely collapse. And here's why I think that is. So hey guys, thanks for stopping by. If this is your first time at the channel, please consider clicking the subscribe button. It'll make sure you never miss any of my content. So if you've seen a recent poll by Mainstreet that came out just yesterday, Doug Ford's support, both for himself, his personal approval rating, but also for his party, has seemed to absolutely crater. In fact, if the election was to happen today, Doug Ford and his party would be relegated to a third-place finish. And despite the fact that Doug Ford has only been in power for slightly less than a year, he is already more unpopular than Kathleen Wynne was when she lost last summer. It's incredible. It's an incredible drop of support for the progressive conservatives and for Doug Ford's approval rating. And again, he didn't have a very high approval rating to begin with, but, you know, this is a major collapse, and it shows that people are not happy. And while there could be a whole bunch of factors for why this is the case, I think there's one issue above all that explains Doug Ford's rapid collapse. It's that he lied to voters. He didn't actually win on the policies he's implementing. And so a lot of people, including those who voted for him, feel betrayed. Because Doug Ford doesn't have a mandate in any kind of moral sense for a good chunk of his actions. If you recall that 2018 campaign, Doug Ford and his party didn't release a platform. They didn't have a costed budget. And they also made a bunch of promises that seemed to indicate he would be something of a moderate. You know, I'm not going to cut a single job. We're going to preserve the basic income pilot. You know, and on and on and on. We're going to do all of these things to kind of reassure people that while we have a different vision, it's not a radically different one. And people voted for that. Sure, there were conservative diehards that would have voted for Doug Ford no matter what he said, but he won his government off people who wanted a change and were promised by Doug Ford and his party that it would be a more or less moderate change. But as we've seen, there have been cuts, rather significant ones. There have been job losses, rather significant ones. The basic income pilot, even though it was promised it would be kept, was canceled. And a lot of things that Ford didn't necessarily say he wouldn't do, but are nonetheless major things that he should have outlined with the voters, he's doing, like attacking the municipal democracy in Toronto. All of these things are major departures from his actual platform, which was very limited. There are certain things, whether it's fighting the carbon tax or whether it was stalling the minimum wage increase, there were things Doug Ford ran on. Buck a beer, of course, that grand pillar of the progressive conservative platform, buck a beer. I mean, these are things that he actually kind of promised, but for the most part, they ran on obscuring the actual nature of their party and of their vision for the province. And here's why. Doug Ford is not stupid. I've made a video about this, you know, a couple months ago. Doug Ford is not stupid. He may be uncultured, he may be uncouth, he may lack eloquence from time to time, but he's not dumb. And Doug Ford and his team learned a crucial lesson from Tim Hudak and the 2014 Ontario PC election campaign. That voters don't actually want what the PCs are selling. Not enough of them to win a government, and certainly not enough of them to win a majority government. They just don't want it. Tim Hudak in 2014 ran a very conservative campaign, promising to cut 100,000 public sector jobs. He was honest with the voters, and the voters punished him for it, because they did not share his vision for Ontario. And so in that election, you saw the Liberals, who were expected widely to lose, they'd been in power for a very long time, they ended up winning, and winning a majority, because the Conservatives in Ontario scared, you know, the quintessential swing voter. And they all went to the Liberals, and that was that. This time around, Doug Ford said, I'm not going to tell the truth. I'm not going to have an actual platform. I'll have a couple platform pieces, and in some cases, I will willingly lie to people to get my power. And then they can't stop me, because there are no do-overs in Canadian democracy when a majority government happens. It's a 4 or 5 year parliamentary dictatorship. Once they're in, and you can't stop them through electoral means. It's impossible. So the reality is that was the lesson. That was the lesson for Ford. Lie to the voters, hide your intention from the voters, because they do not want what we want to do. They do not want to elect us. So we have to lie to them. Simple as that. That's why Doug Ford won, but that's why Doug Ford's collapse is so precipitous. That's why, at least in my view. This is a key factor, because Doug Ford doesn't have the sort of mandate for cuts and austerity that Tim Hudak would have had if he had won. Doug Ford doesn't have the sort of right-wing mandate that Mike Harris had in his first term. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it at all. So when Doug Ford says, I'm not going to cut a single job, the basic income guarantee, that pilot's fine, I'm not going to do this and that. When he says that, people believed him. At least some people did. Enough to give him government. And those people are feeling betrayed. And this is why Doug Ford has collapsed. He does not have a moral mandate for his platform. And people know that under our system, he's going to be premier, likely until 2022, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit longer, because a 4-year window is not a guarantee in Canadian parliamentary democracy. You have upwards of 5 years between elections. So he'll probably be in power from 2021 to 2023, depending on, when he decides to call an election. But people are angry now, and they're voicing their displeasure because they feel like they've been swindled, and they have been swindled by this government. So my hope is that they stay angry, because the reality is that Doug Ford's not going to stop. He's not going to stop his attacks on the most vulnerable. He's not going to stop attacking our education and healthcare systems. He's not going to stop attacking labor standards and attacking protections for tenants and seniors and the disabled and children in poverty. He's not going to stop any of that. He's not going to stop any of those things and a whole host of other bad things he's doing. So people have to stay angry. They have to let this anger, go at a nice, consistent pace. Don't burn out, Ontario. Don't burn out. Because the reality is that Doug Ford is banking on us forgetting about this. And being angry at him now, a couple years before the election, but when the election actually comes, maybe Doug Ford gives out some rebates to people, maybe the cuts become a little less severe, maybe he starts spending some money, and he hopes that voters forget and that he gets another term, and then maybe he starts the process over again, and he starts making cuts right when he gets in office, because again, you can't stop him for another 4 or 5 years. Ontarians need to remember what Doug Ford promised and what Doug Ford is actually doing, because they are worlds apart on a vast majority of issues. So to Mr. Ford, I have to say, I've never been a fan of you to begin with, but what I said during that election, when in my media work, on Twitter, what have you, before I was a YouTuber, what I said then was that you are clearly hiding your intentions from the voters. This is why you didn't have a platform or a budget, because you knew it would be deathly unpopular. And I said, voters have to ask themselves, if they're voting for Doug Ford, what will they actually get? And now we know the answer. Voters are not getting what they voted for. And it's a shame, and you need to be held accountable. And I know, at least I hope, that this will be your downfall. That it's not about you implementing conservative policies, because if the voters wanted that, they would want that. But it's about you running on something of a moderate platform on things like austerity and what have you, and then lying to people once you got your irremovable 5-year parliamentary dictatorship. It's shameful and cynical. It's just as bad, maybe even worse, than Justin Trudeau's lie on electoral reform, and you deserve to lose your government over it. I hope you lose your seat over it too. So thanks guys for watching. I hope you have a good one. If you like this video, please comment and subscribe, share it around. It helps me, it helps spread the message. It helps let people know that Doug Ford is suffering right now, not because of a conspiracy of left-wing elites, but because he lied to the regular Ontarians that made him premier. And if you can, I would appreciate your support on Patreon. It helps me deliver greater quantity and quality of content, and it helps spread the message of, a progressive Ontario and Canada going forward. So thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.